Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host, Michael Howard, Head of Marketing at InfoTools. Today, Bob Lederer, founder of RFL Communications and Chief Mentor and Partner at RSB Insights and Analytics, joins us to reflect on the journey the insight sector has undertaken so far, delving into his substantial experience in the industry. We then dust off the crystal ball to see what may lie ahead for us. Thanks for joining us on the show, Bob.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
No worries. So, Bob, what's the most significant thing you're going to share with us today?
I think it's something that I have thought about for the last few years, and that is, although I was the first initial super proponent for technological change to improve the industry 27 years ago, I now feel that we've reached a point of too much technology that isn't really innovative.
Wow, it's a good way to start. So let's dig into that a little bit then. 27 years. I kind of like that angle, so we'll push through on that. Looking back through time, how have you seen how we've got here so far? Perhaps a few learnings on the way, so people can avoid some of the mistakes of yesteryear?
Well, in 1995, actually in late 1994, I came up with the idea of a new market research newsletter that would focus on new technologies and new methodologies that would positively impact the effectiveness and financially impact in a positive way the market research industry. And the idea came about because I had seen it happen in other industries, and in one industry in particular, the soft drink industry, I had seen it happen in a gigantic way, and I'll share that real quickly with you. Back in the 1970s, if you wanted to buy a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi-Cola or whatever your favorite soft drink beverage is, you could get it in a glass bottle or you could get it in a can. And the glass bottle was either really small or it was a jumbo, like a 1 liter or a 2 liter, and it weighed a ton. Well, what's missing from that picture as compared to today? Well, obviously, it's the plastic soft drink bottle, which didn't really appear in the soft drink industry until 1977. And believe me, because I was working in the beverage industry at that time, the can people and the bottle people did everything they could to try to stop the plastic bottle from entering the marketplace. And the plastic bottle had its challenges getting started, which I won't go into today. But once a bottle that worked, that held the carbonation, was developed, then came the real changes in the industry. There had to be new production lines because filling the plastic bottle was not like filling a glass bottle or a can. There had to be new pallets created because the bottle was a different size, a different shape from cans and glass bottles. The tires on the trucks that transported the plastic containers didn't need to be all as rugged as they might have been for cans and glass because the plastic bottles weighed a lot less. The supermarket shelves had to be readjusted because the plastic bottle was taller than a can and shorter than a glass bottle. So it changed, and that's just some of the changes that happened, but they were enormous. And the industry changed in a way that has not really been impacted as such before. Well, when I started my market research newsletter in 1995, I decided, as I said, let's look at how new technology and methodology were going to change the industry. Well, at that time, there was nothing that I could see, but I knew that if I waited long enough, that something would appear. And I had no idea the internet was about to, come out of the closet and become a major factor. Well, in 1996, my second year with my Research Business Report newsletter, the internet showed up and I started to write about it. And I started talking to people in the research industry who were now playing around and testing internet research, or what we now call online research. And it was coming along, but it was admittedly slow. The people that were online and on the internet, one person said to me, they're a bunch of geeks. It's not representative, or it wasn't then, of male versus female, of different ethnic groups, of different ages, of different financial capabilities, of different educational, backgrounds and such. So it was highly experimental. But I came across a situation in 1997, 1998 that kind of really convinced me of what was about to happen, the explosion of new research capability that was about to happen. I was at an APOR meeting here in the United States, and that's the annual group of academics that get together. And they had two keynote speakers the first night. One was Gordon Black, who was at that point a very, very well-known and established statistician. And he was very, very convinced from the work he'd been doing for a couple of years, he said that night, that the internet or online research was coming, and it was coming faster than anybody could ever really envision. And so he got up and he spoke for about 20 minutes about, ladies and gentlemen, strap on your seatbelts, because once it comes and we all start to use it, it's going to change everybody's ability to do research and a lot of respondents' willingness to do research. Well, the other speaker that night was a guy named Saul Dutka. And Saul was probably in his 60s. And he was the president of Audits and Surveys. He's a guy that had been in the industry probably for 30 or 40 years, and he was very traditional. And he came up to the platform that night after Gordon had finished speaking. And Saul had prepared remarks like this group of papers I have here right now. And he took one look at Gordon and he said, I came here with a presentation I was going to make, and screw that. And he proceeded to toss the papers on the floor. And he turned to Gordon and he said, basically something to the effect of, you're disgraceful. What you're proposing is going to destroy the research industry. It's going to destroy the standards and the norms and everything that we've worked so hard for the last 40 years to try to put in place. And, Gordon didn't take a step back. I went up to Gordon afterwards and introduced myself. And I said, why are you so sure? And he repeated what he had said in the prepared remarks. He said, but I'm telling you right now. And he pointed to Saul and said, in a couple of years, people like that are going to be doing online research, and they're going to be happy that they're doing online research. The internet has really quite clearly over the years not only exploded in its own right, but it has exploded the industry's willingness to try new things. In my 27 years in the industry, I've been asked several times, what do you think is the biggest change in the research industry in my career? And it's very clear to me. 27 or 28 years ago, Mike, if you and I had come up with a great new research capability, we would have had a heck of a time getting anybody to try it.
Yeah.
They might have been willing to if you and I footed the bill for the whole test. And then if it worked, we would have been sworn to a confidentiality agreement that would not have allowed us to take it anywhere else. And in fact, that did happen in some quarters. Fast forward to this very moment. If you and I come up with a great idea during this video for the next 20 or 30 minutes, and we take that idea to a client, they're going to test it so fast that it's going to be like Superman went in and out of the room. They're going to be so willing to try it because everybody now is looking for that technological competitive edge that makes a difference. And that's kind of the long and the short of what I've seen happen in our industry. Technology has really come to the forefront. It has driven the industry in ways we could never have foreseen. It has made the capabilities of other types of research all online acceptable and interesting and coveted by a lot of companies. And that would not have been the case before the late 1990s. In fact, I'll put it very succinctly for you. Before the internet, think about it. If you wanted to do research, here were your options. You could do it through the mail. You could do what American research did for years and years and years, and that is you knock on the back door of a housewife and you say, can I come in and ask you some questions for this research study that we're doing? You could intercept people in the mall. And in the 1960s, they began to do telephone research. And even that in the 1960s was highly controversial. There were a lot of people who said, no, don't do that. That's not an acceptable way to do research.
So I want to pick up on one of the comments on, that Sol made. It was almost prophetic in a sense that the internet would decimate the quality that the industry had been working towards and built up. In one sense, that has come true. We have seen the quality of a lot of, like recently anyway, the quality of the survey data, response data, etc., fraud. What do you think has caused that, and how do you think companies can address that particular issue? How have you seen that?
Well, I will say something here. I'm not, believe it or not, particularly boastful. But I've done two things in my research career that I'm very proud of. Number one is I was the first to point out that new technologies and methodologies were going to change the industry, even though I didn't really know what was coming. Mm-hmm. Okay, I was right about that. And I was also right because in about 2006, 2007, I led the industry's crusade to try to clean up sample and panels that had been put in place between 2000 and late 2006, 2007. And I did that because I heard from a good number of people that the panels, in essence, were a joke. They were duplicative. I don't know how many panels there were back then. Let's say there were 25. Let's say there were 50. But we found out from study over the following number of years that most of the people on those 50 panels were on the other 49 too, most of them. And so we were asking the same people over and over again to please participate in a study. And a lot of them would, and a lot of them went, oh my God, I've gotten 10 invitations today. Is this going to stop? So we both turned off a large segment of the population. And the ones that agreed to stay and participate in panels have either been good, forthright citizens of the community or what we call professional respondents. And that's really been at the heart of what's been going on. Now, after I started to make an issue of it, here in the United States, the Advertising Research Foundation started their own program to try to help clean up the situation. So did CASRO, which was a group here of of research agencies, the biggest research agencies. They started their own plan. And There was another one called the Market Research Institute or something here that also tried to do something, and they eventually all came together, and ARF became the focal point of that. But it could only accomplish so much. And the reason was that you had all these big companies that had panels, and they had a vested interest in not having to do as much work and spend as much money cleaning them up as we all might have wanted them to. And so there was, by 2010, 2011, a pretty good job that had been done to try to clean up the panels. There was progress, but there hasn't been a joint industry capability to go after this since then. And the reason is very simple, Mike, and that is that the clients, the end users at Coca-Cola and Unilever and Motorola and Amazon and Google, you name it, they have not been willing to force the issue and force the sample companies and the research agencies to clean up online research to the point where it would be a really, really good, reliable way to do research. That's not to say that the research we're doing now is terrible, but it leaves a lot that can be cleaned up and made better.
Mm. So in around 2001, you reported that online communities were coming into the fore. They were first being used by companies. I guess there's a sense that brands and consumers and customers were able to start talking with each other in more ways than they'd been used to. So
yeah, what the internet did more than anything was it opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And a lot of other capabilities came into being. In fact, an interesting conversation I had here in my office with some of my people at the time, and my associate editor, my managing editor at the time, Mark Dresner, said something that was very prophetic. And he said, the companies that develop these new technologies are really going to hit a home run, to use an American sport comment, when they can show that they can do something online that you can't do offline. Because to that point, all the online research had been compared to the traditional research done using traditional means. And ironically, I thought it was interesting. They would test and say, now let's see, when we do this survey, face to face with people in a mall, we get these results. When we do the survey online, we get slightly different results. We have to make those slightly different online results basically match the results that we know we've been getting for years and years and years talking to people face to face. And my attitude about that was, that's all very interesting, but how do we know that the traditional way we've been doing research is totally accurate? We don't. So we made online research mimic and provide the same kind of output as traditional research. Now that's come and gone, and we've moved well beyond that. But that was the early thinking about online research.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so we're moving our way through the 2000s now, and that small little handheld devices started making their way into our pockets, handbags, all around the world.
Yeah, but they weren't so handheld and small. They were the size of a shoe.
Yeah, big pockets as well. So
yeah, I remember walking around with one of those.
Yeah. So how were mobile phones, and I say mobile, not smartphones, how were they used by the early adopters in market research?
The earliest adopters in 2003, and we were the first to point this out, in Tokyo, Stockholm, and London, the leading newspapers in those markets were actually contacting people on their way to work and asking them, what did you read in our newspaper today? What advertising do you recall? what major news story did you spend your time to read? And this is 2003. This is 15 years, maybe, before mobile research really started to catch on. So it was there early on. So with things like online communities. In 2001, we did a story with a company called Communispace, which invented the idea of online communities. But it was so new and so radical in many ways, it shouldn't have been, but it was, that even the people at Communispace were uncomfortable calling it research. But it was, and in fact, I say that because the woman who headed Communispace has remained a good friend of mine over the years, and she actually told me about 6 months or a year ago that she was hesitant to call it research because, tell me if this doesn't sound familiar, she had been at a conference a couple of weeks before, she had referred to it as research, and some bald-headed guy in the audience got up and started to scream at her that it wasn't real research, that it was a disgrace, and that it was garbage.
Wow. Okay, so Silicon Valley, alongside VCs, private equity firms, then got into the game, and thing of dreams, right? But as we know, throwing money at problems or opportunities doesn't always bring about the intended success or outcomes. But what impact did VCs and private equity firms have on innovation in the sector?
I've had people explain to me that VCs are very willing to invest in new research tools. I'm not a VC person, so I have no idea about the financial aspect of this. They don't expect to hit a home run every time they make an investment. And I don't know if the winning percentage is 20% or 10% or 30%, but they have been more willing over the years to this day to make investments in new capabilities in research because they see it as a really good short-term investment with a big payout with an exit strategy. And all of these investments are done with a 2 or a 3 or a 4-year exit strategy, whereupon the investor thinks he's going to get his money back and then some at the end of that exit.
Yeah, sure. I guess there's market research is a great industry, I guess, to bet on as well, because if you can solve insights like what consumers are wanting, then like the payback on that across all of your portfolio would be huge, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. You know, there are so many research tools today online that have been developed over the years. I remember a couple of minutes ago, I said that before 1995, there might have been 5 ways to contact people to do a research project. About 5 or 8 years ago, my company tried to put together a little handheld booklet of all the different ways to do research and the most appropriate situation to use it. Just to give you one example, ethnography. Ethnography used to just be P&G would come into your house and go with the housewife down to the laundry room and watch how she used her detergent and her fabric softener and etc. Ethnography today is not just one way of doing research, because you have ethnography at home, but you have ethnography outside a store, ethnography inside a store, ethnography at a football stadium, ethnography at a sports arena. It's very, very differentiated. And so when we tried to put our booklet together, we discovered that there were at least 85 different ways to do a research project. And we figured we would be educating the clients and even the research agencies about all these different options that, that a research project could choose to use for a research project. And that was 5 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It's probably even gotten worse. We never got the booklet published because the numbers kept growing, and we just couldn't reach an endpoint with it. But it taught us a big lesson.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating just to have a look at the market at a like standing back and just seeing how many of those 85, 100, 120, 160, whatever it is now, how many of those are using on each individual project, and like what's the right number of different tools to ensure quality in your response.
Yeah, the one thing is for certain: the industry never stops evolving and coming up with new ideas. And this is where it gets to my central point about true innovation. Part of my job at my communications company over the years has been to open my email and look at all the press releases for some new capability in research. And a lot of the press releases do not spell out what their point of difference really is. They'll claim great innovation, breakthrough, new ways of doing this that have never been available before. But well over half the time over the years, I've gone to the PR agency that sent me the release and said, would you please go back to the company that hired you and ask them to tell you so you can tell me what's different about this, because I don't see it. Mm-hmm. And Mike, I'm not the most technologically or oriented person. I couldn't really do a research project per se, although I can do elementary stuff like surveys. But if you can't explain to me what's really different, how it is better, faster, cheaper, to use the cliche that we all do in the industry today, and we suffer from an abundance that claim to be better, faster, cheaper, but are not.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of the same out there, and that is the challenge for vendors to spell it out clearly. So as we all know with journeys, they never really stop. When they do, another one begins. So thinking then of future innovation and not just limiting ourselves to technology, could also look at processes as well. What do you think lies in store for insights teams of tomorrow? What advice would you give in order to avoid some of the pretty costly errors that we've seen in the past?
I think one of the shortcomings the industry has today, and I've had arguments about this with people in the industry, and I'll point out one in a moment. I don't think that we do as good a job testing these new research tools before we make them broadly available. It used to be, as I've said earlier in this conversation, that if I came up with a good new research idea, that I might be able to get a P&G or a Coca-Cola or a General Mills or somebody like that to test it. And they would test it, and we'd find out if it worked for them or it didn't work at all. Today, we tend to develop a new research tool and roll it out and see what happens and learn, on the job, whether it works or not. Now, I don't think, and I'm not a research agency. I do work for one part-time now, but I'm not a research agency. I think you need to do a very good job of testing a new capability to prove that it works, and that it works in specific situations so that, it can show itself to be worthwhile. Now, I mentioned I want to tell a brief story here. One of my good longtime friends in the industry is Stan Sananathan, who just retired from Unilever. And Stan, when he was at Unilever about 8 years ago, I think it was part of a project that company was undertaking to find new technologies that they could turn into research tools. Now, I hope you're listening carefully to what I just said out there, because they were literally looking for technologies and trying to retrofit them to become a research tool or become part of a research tool. And I asked Stan, why would you do that? Why do you want to waste your time, or spend your time, not waste, spend your time figuring out how to use a new research tool, a new technology for a research tool? And they just thought it was a very smart thing to do. Well, they stopped doing it after about 3 years. At one point, Stan had, I recall, over 30 pilot projects of new technologies that he had turned into research tools, and that they were testing to see if they would really make a difference. And I salute them for doing that. But I think I've been to like IIEX over the years, and they run a conference here in America and in Europe and in Asia as well every year, or at least they did before the coronavirus. And they're very willing to invite new technology people to bring their stuff, there for researchers to see. And to tie it into VC just for a moment, I remember having a conversation with one very young trio of people at a booth with a new technology. And I asked them, how are you going to use this in research? And the leader of the three said, well, we don't know. That's why we're here. And I said, do you have VC money? Oh, yeah, we do. And you don't have any idea how this might apply to research? He said, no. And I said, if I was the VC that was funding you, I would get you on the horn and say, what the heck are you doing? Just going out there and, and making a stab at a dashboard, at a dartboard. Why don't you spend some time and figure out how this might fit, where this might fit? Now, I don't know whatever happened to that capability, but that's the way I look at it, that if somebody's going to give me money to invent something that has potential, I got to find out where it's going to fit, and not just say, oh, look, I can make a guy fly through a television screen and end up on the other side. Well, that's all well and good if you can do that, and somebody will invent that eventually, Mike.
Yeah.
But what would you do with that, even if you could do that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have product market fit. There has to be that problem or issue that people are having that your product solves. It has to be relatively easy to implement, that cost benefit to change what they were doing to your new system. And if that's not there, if it doesn't have a great user experience, then good luck.
And if you can't do it efficiently and for a price that works, the result is similar.
That's right. And people, even within market research, they're being bombarded with all sorts of new tools and stuff. So not just in the insight space, it could be project management, it could be new email systems, like migrating to this or that. So we're flooded with new technologies, as you've said. So we're not just competing against or technology firms aren't just competing against themselves in the same industry. It's far broader.
Yeah.
So I'll just try to look through.
Would you like me to project some ideas of where we might go?
Yeah.
I can throw a dartboard with the best of them.
For sure. Go for it.
Well, in fact, tomorrow, I do a daily video on the research industry. It's called Research Business Daily Report.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's interested in subscribing, and it's free, you might learn some things. But I have a video tomorrow about the potential for chips embedded in people's brains.
Mm-hmm.
Not a very wholesome idea these days, and most people would say, "Are you nuts? Get away from me." but I wouldn't be surprised if down the road that it doesn't become, a fairly practical idea. And the capabilities of what that would provide research-wise to be able to clearly understand, instead of neuroscience with skull caps and whatever, to actually have something implanted within the brain, so you could see how the brain reacts to this ad or that stimulus or whatever. So I don't think that's impossible to happen, and I think it will.
Well, Elon Musk is he's already exploring that, one of his many ventures, isn't he?
Well, I think so, but as far as I'm concerned, he should stay in outer space.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is actually something that we showed on our video. It's got to be 5 or 10 years ago. And there are people academically that are literally working on an ability for right now, you and I on a Zoom call, for you to have an object there or me to have an object here, that you can literally put your hand through the screen and make physical contact with you on the other end. And you're in New Zealand and I'm in Chicago. So that'd be a really long arm, to have to be able to do that. But there are people working on that.
Mm.
And so imagine from a new product perspective, if that was developed, and instead of having to mail, a sample to somebody or to send it to a central location for testing, that you'd be able to reach out and touch my cell phone, my new cell phone, and with new capabilities, and see for yourself what it feels like and that sort of thing. So that is being worked on. And I'm not going to tell you it's going to show up tomorrow, but anybody who's watching this today, you heard it here first.
Nice. Any last firsts that we haven't heard of yet?
No, but seriously, if you watch my videos, we talk about these kind of things all the time, because that's what I'm oriented to. I'm really looking for something that hasn't been looked at, reported, or maybe is underreported, and brings you a totally different perspective that's got relevance to a large proportion of the research marketplace.
Yeah, one thing, final thing that I'm quite excited about where it's going is mobile phones evolved into smartphones and then evolved into these little smartwatches, if you will, or fitness trackers, and the ability to, it's not necessarily reading minds, but it is picking up on heart rates and breathing changes, etc.
Hey,
So
on that very note, I remember as a child back in the 60s, they have Dick Tracy cartoons in New Zealand.
I used to read a little bit.
Okay,
but I don't think
well,
that is
Dick Tracy used to have a watch that with a television screen, with a TV screen, and he would talk to, the members of his crime force.
Yeah.
I remember Dick Tracy calling jujitsu. I mean, and that's in the 60s.
Yeah.
On the other hand, a lot of people thought we'd be the Jetsons by now, and we're far away from being the Jetsons. So
That's right. Okay, so if I can recap what we've talked about today, the market research and insight teams are exposed to way too many innovative tech tools that aren't put through adequate testing before being released into ways of working. They might be useful, but a bit more rigor involved there to really, make an impact for the industry. We took a little walk down memory lane to see how we got there, revisiting some important milestones along the way, such as the early adoption of internet, the birth of online research and communities, initial usage of mobile phones in market research. We discussed innovation post the Millennium Bug, which some of us may or may not remember, including what initially drove the initial uptake of online research. We reflected on the impact of VC and private equity on innovation, and the good and the bad in the market research space. And finally, we had a little bit of crystal ball time with some sage advice from yours truly on the future of innovation on the sector. So I think I captured everything there, Bob.
I think you collected it very well.
Nice. So was there anything you wanted to add before we close?
No, not really. Like I said, I recommend, as you would figure I would, that I do a daily video. It's for free. You'll find out a lot of similar type material. You don't have to watch it every day it comes out, but we will send you an email and tell you what's on the video that day. And if you want to take a look at it, go right ahead. But you'll find new and interesting information, particularly about innovation in the industry and capabilities and what's working, and maybe in some cases what's not working so well. A great example, our video on this past Monday was about Facebook and the fact that their algorithm, according to a recent test, is only 66% accurate, which means that a third of the time people are getting news items that they don't care about, and they're getting ads targeted to them that is just not relevant to them. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty big problem if that is the case with Facebook.
That's right. And as we know, with a lot of algorithms, it's only as useful as the data that's being put in. And right. if people aren't putting all whole of some false data into that, it's only going to serve back to these people what they're supposedly interested in or whatnot. So yes, a big challenge for tech providers, no doubt. So. Okay.
And I'll just say one last thing, and that is, if you're interested in my video, you go to youtube.com/RBDR channel, and you'll see all the videos. They're all lined up. They go back 11 years, so you can see me when I had dark hair. But you'll find a lot of information there, and a lot of the videos are searchable. So take advantage of that too if you like.
Well, Bob Lederer, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. It's great to talk to you, and good luck with your company.
Thank you kindly. And
let us know if you have an innovation.
We will do. Thanks to all the listeners out there as well. If you've liked what you've heard today, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with others, and even write a review. So thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.